Welcome in to Greenville Grit, Greenville residents in touch on 103.7 WTIB. This is the local show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Ribeyes, Kid Construction, and Greenville Toyota. Now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to Greenville Grit. I am Terry Williams.
I'm Michael Overton. Terry,
hey,
good to
Michael.
see you this beautiful spring afternoon. We have
gorgeous.
A wonderful guest with us today, Mr.
Yes,
Bill
we
Clark.
do.
Bill, how you doing?
Thank you for being here.
All right, Bill Clark is president, owner of Bill Clark Homes and founder of Bill Clark Homes. And I remember, now, did you start out in real estate? Did you start out working with Jeanette Cox back in the
No. When I came to Greenville the first time, I was working with Covey Mortgage Company.
Okay.
Then they transferred me to Raleigh, and then I came back and went to work with Leroy Cherry.
That's what it was.
Stayed there about 4 or 5 years, and then in 1977, I started my own company.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
There's got a little history on Bill Clark Homes.
That's
we're
right.
going to tell you what, if you're looking for a new home, we always thank the sponsors, but if you're looking for a new home, here's the man right here. Look for a home in Wilmington and Greenville. That's the thing. Is we hear a lot about Wilmington and Greenville, but you've got Raleigh, New Bern, Myrtle Beach, and Fayetteville.
Right.
Yeah.
So
All
if
over
you're
the
looking
place.
for a place in Myrtle Beach, you live in Greenville, you're listening to us, Bill Clark Homes will get you a home, especially down in Wilmington, too. We're down there all the time.
That's
so
right.
I know your son Heath is down there. I get to see him every now and then. So you guys are building some beautiful homes now. So thank you again for coming on. We also have to thank Ribeyes Steakhouse.
Good salad bar.
That's right, and good steak too. At the corner of Fire Tower and Arlington Boulevard, as well as the location of Williamston. Please support them. If you mention Greenville Grit, you get a surprise. Greenville Toyota, if you're looking for a new Toyota or Scion vehicle or a new used car, call Craig Gillis and the Greenville Toyota team. You can find them on the web at greenvilletoyota.com. You can visit them in person across from Fresh Market on Memorial Drive or call them at 321-3000. Also, the Overton Group Real Estate Professionals serving all of eastern North Carolina. For commercial brokers, leasing and sales, business brokers, property management, and Michelle Connors, Jeff Connors' wife, handles our residential brokerage.
That's right.
We're going to take our 2-minute commercial break. We'll be right back. We're going to have a little discussion about some bond stuff, real estate stuff, and I guess whatever hits our fancy. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. I am Michael Overton along with co-host Terry Williams, and we've got a special guest today, Mr. Bill Clark with Bill Clark Homes. Thank you, Bill, for coming on the show. People want to say, well, why is Bill Clark Homes in? Well, you were on the bond committee with us. And this is a representative of the big committee. We're going to put that out there. But you also, you've written letters to the editor, obviously a very concerned citizen, because this is your home. And this is where your kids were born. And Lance has got his 2 kids here now, and Hunter's still here. And you've got a lot of employees here, too. So we want to make sure for the residents coming into Greenville that they're coming into a community that is exciting to live in. So you can keep building them homes, but frankly, as a town that we can just keep growing and bringing jobs.
That's right.
So one of the things that I think we do want to talk about is, and there's going to be continued discussion of the bond committee. I believe City Council is going to be meeting again to listen to some of the counterparts or other conversations related to that, Terry. But let's start out talking about that. And it's interesting today, Abby Bennett with the Daily Reflector put out an article in the paper, the bond poll paid for through the Mercer's campaign. That was a campaign issued by a very left-wing
I think that
organization.
needs to be put out there, that it's that it was exactly that.
And we don't know. We can speculate on exactly how the question was put out to the people. But they say that there is a lot of support for it. And now I'm not hearing that on my side.
Neither am I.
Let's talk
I
about
don't think
that.
Bill is either.
Well, I support the bonds like all of us do. I think we supported it a little differently than they presented it, because in our committee meetings, as you remember, we did not have anything in there for the Greenway.
That's
And there was a reason for that. The reason we didn't have anything in there because, number one, we wanted the bond amount to be as low as possible so it wouldn't increase the taxes. And second of all, we wanted to make sure that people could see that we were making the right choices about what we wanted to do, and then they would vote for the bond, because it is very important that we get this bond approved, because our streets are in dire need of repair. Now, what we have suggested, and what I wrote a letter to all the council members and suggested that they separate the bond issue for the greenway from the streets, but they decided not to do that. They said that they didn't want to do that. But I mean they're doing that because I think they want to make sure they get the money in there for the greenway. But if most of the bonds we've got, from what they told us, have got a 75% participation grant.
On the greenways, yes.
Yeah, on greenways. So why spend $750,000 when you could spend 25% of that and get the same thing later?
Right.
Well, and a lot of people also don't realize the $750,000 is not even going to pay for the greenway. The greenway's estimated cost is north of $2 million for a
Well, they
mile.
basically
so it's actually,
said
we said it was the $1 million mile, but it's actually the $2 million
That's
mile.
right. The 750 will get the planning for it done and barely get it even started.
Yeah.
For the 750, you're not going to recognize the best part of the greenway until you're in that second million.
Well, and I think there's some division that is trying to be put out there that we, you and I,
Right.
or Alan Thomas, or other people, or frankly Bill, in this case, you are against Greenway, but that's not the truth.
That's not true.
And I think what we are wanting is to separate the wants from the needs. And I know one of the bond members responded back recently and said, well, greenways are very important, just like sidewalks. And I would agree sidewalks are important. But frankly, that wasn't even put into the bond until the very end.
That's right. And the reason for that, too, Michael, if y'all remember, was because we were told by our city manager they do get funding for sidewalks, too.
That's
so
right.
we did put in a little bit of it, I think half a million.
$500,000.
And but we felt like that they would find that money for sidewalks from somewhere else, and we felt like the concentration needed to be for road repair.
Yeah, I think the thing that we, as a bond committee, looked at when we got the director of public utilities came in and said to us, "Our streets are a mess. Our streets are falling apart, and if we don't do something soon, we're going to spend 5 times as much
That's
money
right.
to get this work done." And of course, he wanted a lot more.
Right.
He wanted, he said what we were offering was not going. It was just get him started.
That's right.
And
to
he even
fix
said,
the worst, but it's not going to take care of the ongoing
that's right.
problem.
right.
Get it started. And he said then we also needed every year, in addition to the bond money,
That's right.
we needed $2.5 million from the general budget to go into the street repairs. He said that way they could probably keep up and get the streets back into a shape that they need to be
That's
in.
right.
Well, we don't even have the $2.5 million. I think that the councilors talked about it. They feel like they couldn't get $2.5 million out of the budget to put more into the streets. But even with the bond money, we still need that $2.5 million. And even though this council cannot commit for other councils, they can commit for themselves.
Right.
They can come up and say, "Yeah, we understand." I mean, it didn't take us long as bond committee members to understand how bad it was, and so.
Well, I think Kevin actually brought in a sample for us to see of Martinsboro that literally would crumble in his hands. This showed how severe that road was, and that's one of the roads I believe Kevin said they were going to start working on soon. But
Right. Yeah,
that was an example of where we're heading if we don't get on this.
Well,
Yeah.
what happens if you can get to the streets and put the asphalt on top of the existing asphalt before the base deteriorates to a point that you've got to dig up the whole street, remove the asphalt, dig up what's underneath, and put rock and sand and gravel back in there, then that's what really costs you. If you
Right.
wait too long, that's why it costs you so much more to wait. So.
And I think that's what he was saying about if you can, if they would find a way to put the $2.5 million in their budget, he could stop some of the deterioration by getting to those roads quicker with some of that maintenance, and then, then we'd have to fill in with. We'll have to have future bonds. This bond is just barely touching the surface.
I don't think that we have, and we don't fault the present city council for what's happened. This has been a problem with all the city councils in the past. In the last 5 years, we only spent an average of $500,000
right.
a year to repair our streets. When the director of public utilities tells us that he needs the bond money plus $2.5 million a year.
Right.
That's a big difference.
A whole
and
lot
that's
of
why we thought
difference.
it was so important to stress the streets.
That's right. I think one thing that's really bothered me is that this bond committee spent 6 months deciding and coming to the conclusion of what was the most important, and they just completely discounted that with their proposal that we know that the roads are dire.
And don't forget, they
And
actually reduced, I
they
believe, what
did.
we asked for roads, but then put in some of the other things. They put in more for sidewalks.
That's right.
And look, sidewalks are needed. There are sections
they're-
of town
they're
when you
being
see people
used.
literally walking in
Yeah.
the middle of the street, and I get that. But again, it goes back to what I remember Barbara saying in our committee meeting, that we can get grants for sidewalks. So with that, we made a decision as a committee to say, all right, let's back off the sidewalks. If grants are available, we know that we've got to put the money in the roads. Let's go after the grants for the sidewalks as a separate issue, which is why we brought that down.
Right. That's right. Well, I think, as a realtor in town, when we're showing people around and they're coming from other areas from bigger cities sometimes into our town, they do want greenways. They want places to go. But I think that what really bothers me is, and I thought Tony Parker did a good job on the bond committee, but he recently wrote an article and I read it. But it made it sound like that people are going to give up their cars for greenways. That's not going to happen. I appreciate what he's saying, and we do want people to be able to have a walkable community if that's possible. But people aren't going to park their cars and walk the greenways to work and carry their bags and lunches and get off of work at 5 o'clock, and how are they going to go get back in their cars and go pick up their kids from daycare and pick up their dinners? And they're just not. It's just not. They make it sound like the greenway is going to be the best thing to get rid of less vehicles, and
Well,
that's really not going to be what our greenway, I think, is going to do. I think our
Greenway-
greenway will be
Greenways are
exercise and
recreational.
recreation.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and it's good, and we want it. And that, I made that presentation that night to the city council, and of course Calvin came out in the newspaper article that I was against greenways and in his letter, and that's not at all what I said that night. If they'd go back and listen, I was in favor of splitting the bond with what I consider to be roads altogether, and then sidewalks and greenways on a separate question, and let the public decide. They're taking our right away to decide, and that also bothered me. So,
Well, a big issue I had, and again, Tony mentioned in his letter that he wrote, and all of us want the same thing for Greenville. We all want Greenville
Right.
to prosper. It's how we get there
That's
that
right.
the opinions differ. Some people believe that by having greenways out there, it's going to cause people to move the community. I'm not saying that someone may not move here
Right.
because of that, but my belief is this: you bring the jobs here.
I
We
agree.
create the infrastructure to have the jobs brought here. Then the city has the tax base to be able to afford to put in the greenways to increase that quality of
that's
life.
right.
I just think our first thing, all of our focus needs to be going towards recruiting the good-paying jobs, not your $5 or $7 or $8 retail hour retail jobs, but we need the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year jobs to come into this town to build this tax base.
That's right.
And then in return, the city has money to put into creating recreational areas.
Well, that's right. And these businesses are not going to come to our city if our streets are a mess and can't get around, and it's just not going to happen if our infrastructure is not strong.
And I think that our economy now in Greenville is probably not to the level, has reached the level that some of the other economies have come
Right.
back to. Raleigh, Wilmington, these places are booming. I think we closed 275 new single-family homes in the whole county last year. That's down from 2007. We had 760, I believe.
Right.
So I mean, we're not even
even
close
close.
to being back. And of course, and the big, I guess, I worry about it all the time because that's what I do, sell houses. But I think the reason to that has to be employment, and employment
That's
at
right.
the university. Of course, the university's been hammered with cuts.
As has the hospital.
And
That's
the
right.
hospital has been, hospital and the medical school both had to get rid of 200 people each. That's a big blow
That's
to
big.
Greenville.
No
And-
larger than we are. That's huge.
And that hurts, and that's why we are not humming like some of the other cities are, I think.
Well, I think that comes down to the danger of diversity also, is we had a wonderful run with both the hospital and the university through the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even frankly in the last decade, 30-year run of
That's
this
right.
Greenville booming. And even I have always heard, at 40, I don't remember all of the depressions. I remember some of them, but I always heard too that Greenville, to a degree, was protected from some of the previous downturns because the university and the hospital were growing at such a level. They didn't get hit as probably as bad as some other communities. I don't know if you want to speak for that or not, but we are.
I think what happens with education is that we all pushed education, and education would give just about whatever they wanted at times for up to 5 years ago. Then all of a sudden, the budget got so out of whack that they had to start controlling the giants that were controlling the budgets. And those two giants were, first of all, was the Medicare and Medicaid, and then the education budget.
Right.
So all the universities has been cut. Unfortunately, this is a big dog that wags the tail here in
Right.
Greenville with East Carolina. So it probably affected us more than other cities.
Which is all the more reason why. And we talked with Glenn Webb last week about, growing jobs here on the county level and on the city level, why it's so important. As much as we want and need the hospital and ECU to be here, we need other industry here too. And I was disappointed, of course, like everybody else, when the talk of Volvo may be coming toward the Tarboro area. Well, that would have helped us too. That would have given people in Greenville
look
jobs.
Look at what Clemson has done with BMW in their automotive sector.
Exactly.
Had Volvo came, oh good Lord, my English went down. Had Volvo decided to come to Eastern North Carolina, can you imagine what Pitt Community College would have had some positive results from that? But East Carolina,
And all the impact on our entire county and city would have been tremendous.
Tremendous.
If you look at Charleston, South Carolina, with what they've done with their automotive and the technology people that have come in there in the last 5-6 years, I mean, it's just like a major boon.
Right.
But that goes back to the danger of, and I'm going to change it to lack of diversity, is that we have to go out, we have to recruit these other businesses. I think it's wonderful what Maine Pharma has done. I think it's wonderful what Patheon has done, bringing the DNA lab, and we've got some exciting things, and yes, we've added jobs. But we've got to continue to have a major focus on that. And I'm concerned about the departure of Carl Reese. We've got an empty economic development position within the city. What are they going to do about that?
And what's happening right now, who's the interim? I don't even know who's handling where he left off at this point.
Well, I just don't want to lose that focus.
That's right.
I mean, Carl did some good things for us, and it could be dangerous because every major community is fighting for the same thing we're fighting for.
Let's switch back over just a minute to the bond and the maintenance fund, because when I made, and I know you did too, when you spoke to the city council and when I did, I told them in that conversation to show good faith and confidence building in the community for them to go ahead in their June budget and set aside the maintenance so that the public could see, yes, we want your vote in November for the bond, but in the meantime, we're going to do this in good faith to show you we're going to live up to our, to part of that bargain from the bond committee about what we wanted. Now, they're saying they don't have the $2.5 million, but if they would just start something, if it is $1 million, if it's whatever, just put something.
Dr. Crosby mentioned that at that meeting that I was in. He said, I think that we probably need to really do consider this, but it sort of lost traction after that.
I think
and
so
nothing's
too.
Been said.
But I don't see how it's sort of like painting a house one time in its life and never painting it again. And that's sort of what you're putting out there. Yeah, we want you to give us this, what's the total, $8 million for roads and the other things or whatever, but we're not going to take care of it once you put it in the ground. And that's what it sounds like by them not making the move and not talking it up, that we're going to set that up.
All right, I have an issue with that.
Okay.
You can't tell me you don't have it when you're not challenging the budget yourself.
Right.
If the city manager, I'm not speaking against the city manager or city staff here, but if they're coming and they're putting this budget on your desk and you're approving that budget without vetting that budget, how do you know what you do and don't have? And that was one of the things when Dennis Mitchell was on there and Max Ray Joyner Jr. and Alan, they had the budget workshop and went very in depth on that budget to find some money. And then last year, I think it reverted back to the way it had always been, where the city manager says, here's our budget, approve it or don't approve it. And they did. Don't tell me you don't have it.
Right.
Hadn't been vetted.
I think they need to find it. I think it's important enough. And what's going to happen if the bond doesn't pass and they don't do some maintenance, they're going to have to find that money, and something else is going to suffer because the work's got to be done. What will we do when you have to constantly dodge more potholes? And
So what do we do, Bill, if the bond does not pass? If they keep it as it is today, and honestly, I don't think it'll pass.
At some point in time, you're going to have the money, and you're going to have to get it through a bond. We cannot take that much money out of the budget.
I don't see it either.
I mean, you know, we're getting $8 million to start with, and we need $2.5 million addition to that every year. Well, you know, that's a big chunk. I mean, so you can't get it out of the budget. You can't get $8 million out of the budget. So I think that the bond, and that's why I wanted the bond to be separated from the Greenway, so we'd have a better chance of getting the bond passed.
Right.
It's going to be a blow. It's going to be quite a
big
blow.
blow. It'd be a tremendous blow. It just put us back. I mean,
well, what's going to happen is the city's going to, at that point, have to go out and borrow the money to do this, most likely.
Exactly.
Unless they just empty out the vehicle replacement funds that are running up north of $7 million.
I also want to just mention, I know we've got to take a break, but when we come back, I want to mention about this poll that Calvin had done and Rick Smiley, and how I think this is very irresponsible. I want to make a comment about that.
We'll look forward to hearing that in 2 minutes. We'll be back in 2 minutes to talk about the poll.
Are you thinking about what to do for dinner tonight? That's easy. Head over to
Welcome back. We've had a really good discussion here. Thank you, Bill Clark, for being our guest today and talking to us about your views about the bond. And we were discussing the article a little bit at the break, that there was an article in the paper, and Kevin Mulligan was speaking about the road work they're doing right now. I believe it's like 30 different areas that they're working on resurfacing. And I was confused based on how the article read, where the money was coming from. And there was some money allocated by the city council that they had been using over the last couple of years. And he'd stated that what they're doing now is typical of a road servicing project. This one went in about the 1.8 to 2 million, but these funds weren't coming from the budget or from any other money except that 4 million that had been
was the 4
allocated.
million that was done not in the current council, but the previous
council that had not been used yet.
So thank God that they put that money. Because if I'm not mistaken, that was not a unanimous vote to put that money aside.
No, it wasn't. Well, what I wanted to say real quick about this bond poll that Calvin's people had, and why I think this was irresponsible, is because how it was slanted. It's making it sound like that there were a lot of people in the public that are for the bond based on this poll, and that's simply not that is not a cross-section of our population. It was targeted, and if I understand how the question was asked, it wasn't specific, like many of the polls aren't when they call you. It wasn't specific, are you in favor of the bond with this, this, and this on it? Which just asked the question.
That's how he put it on here, though.
And that's not how it was done. So I think that's a little misleading, and I think it was a little irresponsible for him to say, oh, these people, this amount of people, 400 or 500 people are in favor of the bond. Based on our voting public, that does sound like a lot of people are in favor of it. But they've got to get out and vote. They've got to get out and vote, and I hope that we'll get the bond and the questions to the point where we can support it and get our roads fixed.
Well, I think it'd be almost a done deal if they took the Greenway out of the bond, separated, let people vote on that particular issue itself. I think it'd be a much easier task
I think
to
so
get
too.
the bond passed. That's one reason I voted that. That's one reason I felt that's the way we should do it. We got to have the money.
What I think they could do is let's go ahead, let's change this question, get it in for just the streets, take the Greenway out, but go ahead and make a plan about how are we going to proceed with that Greenway. We've got two now that are fully funded sections that will be built. Let the public see those and see, how they're being used and the need, and then I think we can get the Greenways through grants, and they can probably find the $750 in the budget somewhere.
I think there's opportunities too with Greenways because they are popular to try to do public-private
That's what I think it should be.
partnerships with them.
That's exactly what I think it should be. I think that's the way. And I would like to see that all of these supporters that keep coming to the city council meetings to support the Greenways to get out there and get an idea put together, put their own public-private partnership together and get their Greenways done. And they never have come up with a different idea other than
keeping in mind too
this.
with this, and someone else has said it, is that once this bond is approved, you're going to start getting taxed on this, and this is not going to build the Greenway. This is only going to do the drawing. So you're paying taxes on something that is not fully funded, and may sit for several years that you're paying taxes on before it even starts. So
That's right.
well, Bill, thank you again for coming. Thank you for being a part of the show today, for your previous sponsorship. So, again, if you're looking for a home, go see Bill Clark Homes at BillClarkHomes.com. Also, we got to thank, once again, the Overton Group, Greenville Toyota, and Ribeye Steakhouse. If you missed us tonight, you can see us at 6:30 Friday night or 9 a.m. Saturday morning on Cable 7. Until next time, who's going to be on next week, Terry? Help, Alan Thomas. Mayor Alan Thomas is going to be on next week.
Yeah, he will.
So more bond discussion,
talk.
That's what it's coming out to be. And until next then, we'll see you next week. Enjoy the weather. Talk to you soon.